It's Tuesday night, Pokemon fans. Welcome back to the Forge Tuesday Night Social League. I'm joined here by Tom. I'm John. Tom, how are you?
Doing well, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You had 2 cups this weekend or just one?
Just one for me this weekend.
And how'd you do?
I got top 4 with Colorless Lugia.
Colorless Lugia, one of my favorite decks. Hopefully tonight we'll be seeing some of our players playing that Colorless Lugia. Tonight here at the Forge, they have made 151 legal.
Absolutely.
So hopefully some Colorless Lugia with Mew EX.
Mew EX, the big new card, but a couple of other cards that you might let slip under the radar, and that is Charmander. And the big thing about the Charmander from 151 is, unlike all the other Charmanders we have in legality right now, they have 60 HP. This new one has 70, which is a big deal going up against these Lost Zone decks.
Sableye.
This means Sableye can't knock out 2 Charmanders at once, so we might be seeing a big resurgence of Charizard EX, and that's what we have on stream here tonight.
Yeah.
We have Max on the right playing Gardevoir EX, and Paul on the left playing Charizard. And we talked a little bit about that Sableye. The interesting thing about Paul's deck is that it is a Lost Zone Charizard EX deck. So we're going to see some Sableye action. Exactly. So we'll let these players know that they can get started here, and we'll be underway.
Max on the right side of the screen, the Fort Wayne champion of 2023, coming off a couple points gains for him this weekend. At the same cup that you were at, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Mankato.
Max playing this Guardy EX deck for a little while here, trying to get more comfortable with it. It wasn't something that he played a ton in the past format, but it's something that he's considering for Peoria. That is in about 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks. So he's trying to get a few more games into it, and I think this is a good matchup to test yourself against, because I could see this deck being a bigger thing here at Peoria.
Yep, we only got about a week and a half of testing before we get ready to all the group of us who's headed down to Peoria to hopefully get some championship points.
Absolutely.
Gardevoir, though, kind of one of the best decks in format, but it'll be interesting to see what people are testing out ahead of time and what they actually take to Peoria, because Peoria will be the first regional tournament where 151 is legal. By one day?
By one day.
By one day.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be interesting.
So will be definitely very fun to see what impact that set has on the meta. I think one of the things that was interesting about last weekend is we saw Charizard EX do very well down in Brazil at a regional that they had. And I think that was a deck that was maybe lower on people's radar going into Peoria, and now they have to think about it a little bit more.
And you mentioned it previously, and you played it this weekend. Colorless Lugia, also kind of a big specter winning some online tournaments.
Yeah, absolutely. But it looks like our players are getting underway here. Paul starting us out, starting that Sableye. Looks like it was an Ultra Ball, Ultra Balling away, maybe a Boss's Orders. Not entirely certain what that first card is, and a Water Energy to go find that first Comfey. So when you see this deck immediately, if you're Max, you might not fully expect Charizard yet, although Max knows Paul, so Max already knows what he's up against. But one of the interesting things at a regional is you start with a Comfey and a Water Energy and a Greninja and a Sableye.
People are expecting just Dragonite and Raikou, maybe some Turbo action.
And it could throw them off in those early turns, playing differently against the deck, not exactly knowing what it is.
The goal there to take that first quick game 1, then they know what you're about, and then you can just rage as fast as you can, getting that Infernal Rain into play.
Yeah,
putting that energy where we need.
Now, unfortunately for Max, although he does have a Battle VIP pass in that hand, which is always good to see as the Guardy player, he did start that Zacian V, and what that means is we're definitely not going to see a retreat into Mew on Max's first turn, which is usually what he'd want to do. Plus, it's a 2-prizer in play. That's not too hard for Charizard to knock out. So, an unfortunate starter there for Max. But we see Paul working on those first flower selectings and just sending 1 Psychic Energy to the Lost Zone there.
A good start is starting with a Battle VIP pass in hand is ideal, getting your Rolses down.
Yeah.
But I mean, 2 of them are prized, not the worst prizes as well.
Yeah. An interesting thing there for Paul on his side, no Charmanders down on this first turn. But the funny thing about this Lost Zone Charizard EX deck is that you don't really need to on that first turn, because going into turn 2, you can just be attacking with Cramorant and let your Charmander sit on the bench and evolve them on your third turn. Now we're going over to Max here. We see this Battle VIP pass. Considering what to take here, he has some rare candies in hand and an Iono. Unfortunately, that Iona means those rare candies are going to be going to the bottom of his deck, which is not really where he wants to see them. But this Battle VIP Pass at least will find him 2 of those Ralts. And like you mentioned, John, 2 VIP Pass in the prize cards there is a little bit tough for Max because he'd like to find a second one of those at least off of this Iona that I assume he'll be playing here later in this turn. And the odds of that are pretty low.
Opting to choose the memory skip Ralt. Is he planning on making one of the Charizards skip a turn if need be?
I think it's more he wants to evolve that one first because it is a little bit weaker to that Sableye. So before Paul gets to that 10 in the Lost Zone and can utilize that Lost Mine attack, he can get that 60 HP Ralts evolved up and it's not as much of a worry. But that is a good call there, John, that later in the game we could see if Paul knocks out that Ralts and Max brings it back with a Super Rod or something like that. We could see that memory skip come into play on that Charizard as it only has 1 attack.
I think we did see at EUIC Tord Reklev using that just to stall an Arceus deck a little bit toward the lore, just buying himself some more time in that final matchup.
Yeah, and it's one of those attacks that your opponent doesn't always think about. You see them evolve into a Curlia, then a Guardy.
How bad could it be?
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is you see your opponent evolve in a Curlia, then to the Gardevoir, and you don't think about what's underneath when you're targeting them down. But if you were going to target down a Curlia, let's say with the boss's orders, you might want to check that you're not knocking out the one with the memory skip Ralts underneath it, because that means they can recycle that card and it could come back to bite you later. So it's those small micro decisions that players can make over the course of the game that can really affect later turns.
For those who are not quite up to speed watching Pokemon for the first time, a quick overview of how the decks work here. Max's deck based on the Gardevoir EX, which allows him to attach energy from his discard pile to his Pokemon, psychic Pokemon, in any way he would like. For each energy attached to them. So very powerful. Can be a little bit slow at the beginning. You can maybe two or three turns to really get fired up, but once it gets going, it is absolutely insane to watch it. Paul, on the other hand, using the Lost Zone engine, essentially a way of getting cards, choosing some cards, and then discarding them. Those discarded cards then allowing other abilities to come online, depending on how many cards you've gotten rid of. So you'd see on the screen right now, Paul has 5 cards in the Lost Zone. That would mean that he can attack with a card called Cramorant for no energy.
Absolutely.
So the more you spend, the more you can do.
Yeah. And Paul with a pretty good turn here, 2 Flower Selectings and a Colress. He has that Cramorant in hand, which is going to be able to attack. He'd probably like to pair that with an Escape Rope and target down one of those Ralts instead of just doing 110 damage into this Zacian V. I did see, I believe, a Charizard EX in that hand. Not sure if he has any rare candies, but that Charmander came down this turn anyway, so it can't evolve this turn. Now, one of the things we noticed there is Paul Lost Zoned his Manaphy. And the question is, does Max play that new Mew EX in this Gardevoir EX? Does Moonlight Shuriken attack with Mew EX, the new Mew EX from 151.
Kiss 2 Pokemon on the bench goodbye.
Yep. So Paul might have to think now after Lost Zoning that Manaphy. Once he takes that Greninja off the prize cards, he's going to have
the Charmander. We're not going to see a Charizard, it looks like, this turn because that Charmander is knocked out.
Yeah. Now, the tough thing here for Max is it makes sense to target down that Charmander, but Paul did do 110 damage into that Zacian V last turn with the Cramorant, and he can do it again this turn and take 2 prizes on that Zacian V. And we did not see any of those Ralts get evolved up on Max's turn. So they are very vulnerable to a Sableye if Paul can work towards that 10 in the Lost Zone on this turn. He'd have to do a little bit of work for it. He'd have to find a third Comfey probably, but that is something that he could do.
Have we seen we've seen 1 Colress for Paul.
And I think this is his second that he's working on now, yeah.
Colress Experiment allow you to draw 5 cards from the top of your deck, choose 3 of them to keep in your hand, and then put 2 of them in the Lost Zone. One of the best ways to get cards in the Lost Zone as fast as possible. Also, seeing a lot of cards. Some Fire Energy and a Super Rod going into the Lost Zone. No, it makes me wonder what he actually took.
Yeah.
That was expensive.
That's expensive. He already has Fire Energy in there, a Charmander in the discard pile, and a Charmander in the Lost Zone. He only plays 3 Charmander, and that Super Rod could have gotten that one back that Max knocked out on the last turn.
Does this really comfy going into the Lost Zone? Does this Lost Zard usually play? How many copies of Super Rod?
Usually 2.
2, all right. Still options left, but the options, some of them going into the Lost Zone. Currently 9 cards in the Lost Zone, 10 in the Lost Zone, enabling Sableye. Sableye's attack, my least favorite in the entire TCG, allowing you to place 12 damage counters however you would like on your opponent's Pokemon, and that skips Manaphy.
Yeah. So we see Paul utilizing that Jet Energy to bring Comfey into the active and then retreating out of it into that Cramorant after using Flower Selecting. Going to take 2 prizes here on this Zacian V.
Oh, gonna go find a Charmander. It looks like with the Artisan. Artisan allowing you to find a non-rule box basic Pokemon.
Now, we did see Paul lost on a rare candy on that last turn, so that begs the question, did he lost on it because he already had one in hand, or is he going to have to keep digging for that on his following turn?
Max, I think, knows what's coming. Even though that energy has gone into the discard pile, once that Gardevoir EX gets fired up, you see him set it to the side because that energy is coming back out to play.
Yep.
Interested to see what Max can get going here.
So we see that Artisan is probably going to help out Max here. He doesn't have any Ralts prize, so he can get a 4th Ralts down from that Artisan, and that's probably what we're going to see him do. The question is, does he have... I guess one of my questions here, it looks like he's eyeing up that Cresselia. Does he have a way to get to the rare candy Gardevoir EX play here on this turn, or are we going to see a Mirage Skip? And the thing is, if we see a Mirage Skip on this turn, that's probably game over. It's just like you get a lot of Curlias out into play, but in this case he could only get 2, and then Paul's going down to 3 prizes remaining. I think that Max definitely wants to target down that Charmander with this Cresselia if possible on this turn.
Paul with the Sableye on the bench, absolutely drooling whatever crystals that it consumes at the thought of taking out some of these Raltses.
Yeah.
See Curly go down. Refinement, though, allowing him to see more cards. Curly having an ability that allows you to see more cards out of your deck for very little cost.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll see what Max is able to do here. I didn't get a great look at his hand. I saw some energy in there, a Lost Vacuum, his own Artisan. So I imagine the first thing we're going to see is a refinement of that Psychic energy to draw 2 more cards here for Max. Looking for a rare candy, Gardevoir EX.
There's a rare candy.
Unfortunately, he paired it with a Professor's Research, but he's already got the EX in hand.
I didn't
realize he's hiding it in there. So
you think Max will pull back into the Cresselia play, spreading some damage around, and then placing it on the Cramorant?
Yeah, and I think we're going to see probably just a full... What I'd like to see Max do here is Lost Vacuum away Paul's Artisan so he can't use it, but just choosing to Professor's Research there, maybe Max wants to utilize that Artisan later, potentially to get this Cresselia back on his following turn if it gets knocked out.
Cresselia kind of like the poor man's Sableye. You can take your damage and put it on the opponent's Pokemon.
Yeah, and it's definitely a great counter to Sableye. Because if Sableye starts spreading damage around, you can heal some of that off.
Hand it right back.
Exactly. We see Max draw into the Collapse Stadium, Manaphy, a Ralts. So in a pretty good spot here. He probably wants to get that other Ralts evolved up into a Curlia, but choosing to just bench it here, a Manaphy here, and it looks like we're probably going to see some Psychic Embraces come down from that Gardevoir EX to spread damage around the board, and then heal it all off with that Cresselia.
All right, Gardevoir EX doing what Gardevoir EX does. For each energy attached to your Psychic Pokemon any way you like, you do have to add 2 damage counters. Some of these Pokemon, though, for each energy you put on them, they do more damage, like Sharding Arcana Gardevoir, which I think I saw in Max's hand. But you think we'll see a retreat into Cresselia?
I think so. Setting up those 8 damage counters on his side of the board. Going to be able to move all of those damage counters to one of Paul's Pokemon with Cresselia's Moonglow Reverse Attack. And I imagine he's going to be targeting down that 70 HP Charmander that's just sitting there on Paul's bench.
Not concerned about the Sableye?
I think you just
Charizard?
have to assume that the Sableye is going to be coming at you no matter what. You definitely don't want to see a 330 HP Charizard EX get into play that one-shots your Gardevoirs.
With Zacian already out of the game right now, being in the discard pile, you do have Sharding Arcana Gardevoir for that. Can you hit those numbers, though?
You can with a reversal energy, and it looks like Max actually fearing that Sableye more than the Charizard EX at this point, but... and maybe he's correct to do so. One Super Rod down, it might be tough for Paul to get that Sableye back, but we do see that Nest Ball already in Paul's hand.
Grabbing rare candy
Charizard
and
EX
here comes
in
the
hand.
Charizard.
And I wonder if Max is regretting that decision, or if he's saying to himself, you know what, this just gives me the opportunity to take 2 prizes against Paul now. I can find those reversal energies. I can find the Shining Arcana Gardevoir and take that big KO against Paul on my next turn.
You keep referencing Reversal Energy. For those not quite in the know, Reversal Energy provides 3 energy of any type, essentially prismatic energy, to a non-rule box evolved Pokemon. So a lot of
If you're behind on prizes.
If you're behind on prizes. So when you need it, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work a lot of the time, and you couldn't slap it on a lot of the really heavy hitter Pokemon. But It might be exactly what you need to take out that Charizard.
Exactly.
Also point out the Charizard is a dark type. I often confuse it for a fire type. There is a new fire type in 151.
Yeah.
Gardevoir EX, weak to dark. So one shot from that thing, no matter how few prize cards you've taken, and that's it.
Yep. So luckily for Max here, though, we see a Colress come down from Paul, not a boss's orders, onto that Gardevoir EX. So that means that unless Paul is able to Sableye this turn, that Charizard, if it attacks, is only going to be knocking out Max's active Pokemon.
Not too many ropes.
He could rope, but I imagine Max will, as one of the reasons Max benched that Manaphy was probably in case of a rope here, can just sacrifice it to the Cramorant or the Charizard.
Hey, give him
Something like
give him a
that.
Curlia, or not Curlia, give him a Ralts.
Yeah.
Ralts is often cannon fodder against these lost decks.
Yeah, but we see Paul get up to 11 in the lost zone here now, which means that Sableye's Lost Mine attack is online, and now the question is, did Max knock out that last Sableye for no reason? And now he also has to face down a Charizard EX, or the other question is, does Max want to face down a Charizard EX? It's a 2-prizer. It accelerates that prize trade against these lost zone decks where normally you can only take 1 prize at a time.
Max thinking hard about that rope that just came down too.
Yeah.
Looks like that Ralts is going to go be the sacrificial lamb. Cresselia going to be hiding back on the bench.
Yeah, I think one of the things Max is assuming here is that Paul's going to go into that Sableye, and so probably one of these Raltses is going down anyway. So if he gives him the Manaphy, you really only want to give him the Manaphy if you think that Manaphy is going to get KO'd. Otherwise, that Manaphy could get stranded in the active. But since one of these Raltses is going to be KO'd no matter what by that Sableye, you just put it in the active anyway and say, I get to decide what to promote on my next turn after you knock it out.
Paul choosing to do some flower selecting. Deck's looking really thin for Paul.
Unfortunately, though, for Paul, he probably wants to get 2 Charizard EXs into play, and he is not going to be able to do that this game now. 2 rare candies are now in the lost zone, and this deck only plays 3.
Uh-oh. Come on, Paul. Charizard, one of everyone's favorite Pokemons, paired with
Yeah.
my least favorite Pokemon.
So the funny thing here, though, is Paul might only need that 1 Charizard as long as Max isn't able to boss KO it. Paul just needs to take 2 prizes with that Charizard on the Gardevoir EX and then finish off that last prize with the Sableye or Cramorant. So as long as Max doesn't KO that Charizard EX this turn, Paul is in a pretty good spot. The question will come down to Max plays 4 Iono, maybe 3 Iono, but a lot of Iono. And Paul is going to be in a tough position if he gets Iono'd to 3. But you already mentioned his deck is pretty thin, so those Ionos might not
Actually help him, yep.
nearly as bad. And so the question will really come down to, can Max limit Paul's draw potential and come out on top because Paul can't find whatever piece that he needs to close out the game?
So at this point right now, Tom, you're Max. What are you hoping to hunt down right now?
I think either he wants to get that Cresselia back into play and just Moonglow reverse that Sableye, or he wants to get a boss KO on that Charizard EX. The problem for Max is I don't know if he can get there because he only has 3 energy in the discard right now, and a pretty rough hand that's not going to get him more energy into the discard pile.
And no reverse energy if he needs to bump up some
Yeah.
of the Pokemon as well. Reverse energy, one of the few that cannot be attached with Psychic Embrace. No special energy from that.
Yep. So one of the things, too, is Max is probably going to want to bump that stadium. He does play the Pokemon League headquarters, which is a big help against the Sableye.
You never know when you need that, but when you need
Yeah.
it, you need it. It makes all of your basic Pokemon take 1 additional colorless energy to attack. So that Sableye would now take 2 energy to attack.
So Max drawing into another Curlia. He could evolve that Ralts in the active. The only problem with that is that gives that Ralts, well, actually, it's probably good here. So one of the things that Max doesn't like to see is he has energy on that active Ralts, but Beach Court gives basics 1 less retreat cost, which means if he retreats out of that Ralts, that psychic energy doesn't go to the discard pile. And the funny thing is, Max actually does want that psychic energy to go to the discard pile. But if he evolves into that Curlia not being a basic doesn't get additional retreat cost assistance from that Beach Court, and he can retreat that energy off.
See Cresselia being brought out, going to be taking some damage and then spreading some damage.
Yeah, so
Any case to be made here for taking that Cresselia and setting up the Charizard for damage?
I think that you just have to assume you're going to draw into your reversals when you need them. And so you probably just have to go over the Sableye here at this point, because that Charizard paired with a boss's orders is definitely scary. But if Max can Iono on this turn and maybe prevent Paul from getting to that boss's orders, the Charizard isn't as much of an issue right now.
Grabbing that reversal energy in hand, unable to get that Zacian in play though because the bench is full. Attaching through Psychic Embrace.
Spreading those
some
energies
damage
around.
Cool thing about Gardevoir EX as well, you kind of have infinite retreat. As long as they can take the damage, you can put the energy they need to get out.
Yep. One of the weaknesses that Guardy has, though, is it cannot Psychic Embrace to those non-Psychic Pokemon. So sometimes those Manaphies, those Greninjas, can get stuck in the active by your favorite card, Mawile.
It's just mean when you do it. Opting to take out that Sableye. I think we're going to see some options. Go get some cards from Paul, and then Paul might be pulling back into that Charizard EX if he finds the boss's orders here.
I think Max really would have loved to find an Iono on that last turn. Paul, a very big hand to work with, but I don't see the boss's orders in that hand necessarily, unless maybe it's peeking out there. I'm not quite sure.
It's tempting to take those 2 quick prizes, and anything you hit that that Gardevoir EX with, if it's from a Charizard and it's a Dark type Charizard, that is night. All thinking here.
I also think if I were Paul, you kind of want to use the Charizard on this turn because Max is building up those energies in the discard pile. Paul's going to be ahead on prizes no matter what, and that means reversal energy is active, and you have to assume Max is eyeing down that Charizard for the next turn.
Max still needs to take 3 prize cards, though. This is a tough prize trade. But if anyone can do it, Max can. Max and Paul actually friends via Max's girlfriend?
Yes, I believe Paul is Sam's cousin.
All right, perfect.
Yes.
Everyone's very friendly here at the Forge.
Yes.
Actually, speaking of which, don't forget to please subscribe to the channel here. We do this every Tuesday. Tom, thank you for commenting with me again.
Yeah.
Always teaching me
always
more about
love
Pokemon.
to do it with you, John.
Appreciate that. I also like to say hi to my wife for letting me do this every Tuesday as well.
I have to do the same, yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Paul going to go flower selecting, trying to find 2 options. Opting to get rid of the Battle VIP Pass, the easiest choice in the TCG.
Now he found that second Super Rod that we'd been mentioning earlier, and that is going to be very helpful here to get those Sableyes back into the deck. Now the question is, does he go for the second Sableye? I don't know if he does here because I'm not sure he has enough Psychic Energy to do that. So just eyeing down that Fire Energy, potentially it could be use that Fire Energy to retreat out of a Comfey, or well, no, he's out of Charmander, so there's no other Charizards coming into play.
Does he play Mirage Gate?
Well, I don't know because some Lost Zards do, some don't.
Mirage Gate into Radiant Greninja. Oh, excuse me. There's an Manaphy on the field. Good job for Max.
Yeah, and
oh, there it is.
He didn't shuffle back the Water Energy that was in the discard though, so I imagine that he doesn't have that Greninja play, even if the Manaphy wasn't in play. And it looks like there was a Mirage Gate in that discard pile, so I guess Paul does play those Mirage Gates. A
Mirage Gate allowing you to accelerate 2 energy to your Pokemon any way you like, but only if you have 7 cards in the Lost Zone. So one of those kind of things that comes online as you play.
Now we're seeing this rope from Paul. Max choosing to send up that Kirlia. And that Beach Court is still in play. Max did not bump it on the last turn, which means that this Comfey is going to have free retreat here that Paul just roped into.
Paul does not appear to have a boss's orders in hand. Does have a Colress, but that is going to be the majority of his deck.
Gonna see a Roxanne here actually from Paul, yeah.
So Paul is going to be drawing 6 cards after he mixes up his deck. Max is going to be drawing 2 cards, which means Max is probably not going to see that reversal energy, which was in his hand.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough.
And I think this Kirlia, unless Paul can get a Sableye out here, this Kirlia is probably going to be going down to that Cramorant on Paul's bench, which means Paul will go to 2 prize cards remaining, and all he has to do is find boss on that Gardevoir EX for the next turn with the Charizard EX. And so from those 2 cards, so Roxanne is a very strong comeback card. It means it basically says if your opponent has 3 or less prize cards remaining, you can play this card and your opponent draws 2 cards and you draw 6. So it's a way to come back from behind.
I'd like to say, I think you called it. There is a boss's orders in Paul's hand. Good to see. We've already retreated. Oh, that was an escape rope previously.
So utilizing that beach court to have free retreat on that active Comfey, retreating into the Cramorant, and Spit instantly will take the KO on that Kirlia. And like you said, John, Paul has that boss's orders for game in hand on the next turn, and so Max is going to have to find a way to either disrupt that hand or take that KO on the Charizard EX.
Sees his boss's order for himself. Not a lot of options, though, right now.
Yeah, I think Max is asking for a lot on this turn. Level ball Palpad, not really what he needs to see here, but can play that level ball. If there's anything left in deck to thin out, he can thin it out a little bit and continue drawing. But I think we haven't seen the Celebrations Mew come down. That might be one thing that Max can do, but no switching cards, so that Mew cannot get into the active position. And so all it really is an easy Sableye target for Paul at this point. So I think we're going to see that get refinemented away.
Yeah, sometimes the name of the game here is just increase the odds of get what you need.
Yep.
Thin the deck out and then try to draw into the cards you need. Right now, Max probably looking for an Iono just to disrupt that hand if he knows there's a boss's orders there, which how would he, I suppose?
Yeah, I think you just have to assume that Ionoing to 2 is your safest bet.
Yes, just assume they have what they have.
Yeah.
They have what they need.
See, refinement, he draws the reversal energy to reversal energy. Now, the problem here for Max is he has no additional draw, no way to find the Shining Arcana Gardevoir, which is the card he needs to use to find or to take that KO on the Charizard EX, and he has no way to find it here.
Does Paul have game?
I think Paul just has game.
Unless Max does Max things, checking the Lost Zone to see exactly what Paul's working with. I always hate when your Lost Zone opponent has 2 battle VIPs P passes in there. It's just checking the discard pile. Kind of gathering up what resources Paul has left. That is a very thin deck.
One of the things Max maybe could have done on that turn, he had Palpad in hand before he refinemented. He could have Palpaded for 2 Ionos back into the deck and just increase the odds of finding the Iono. He can bump that free retreat stadium, though, so he could boss stall that Greninja or something. But definitely probably doesn't want to do that. I think we're just going to see the KO here taken by the Cresselia.
2 very technical players. Max obviously very experienced. Paul having great experience playing against his family members that are pretty good at this as well.
Yeah. So we're going to see this Cresselia use its second attack, which is not something we normally see. And Max already preparing that extra energy on the Cresselia because he knows he's going to play that Pokemon League headquarters, which says your basic Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's, require 1 more energy to attack.
So at this point, I think Max hoping to get that Shining Arcana Gardevoir. On a Palpad to Palpad allows you to take 2 supporters and put them back into your deck and then shuffle your deck. So increasing the odds to find a boss and an Iono. Next turn, we might not see a next turn, though.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we already know that Paul has game in hand. The only thing that would prevent that is if Max chose not to take the KO here and Paul had no way to retreat into that Charizard EX.
Got a question in the stream here. Why does Paul draw 6 and Max draw 2? It's actually how Roxanne works. A huge hand disruption where when you play that card, your opponent draws 2 and you draw 6.
Yeah,
Seeing the boss's order coming out for the Gardevoir and the fist bump.
So well played by both players there. I think that's just one of the main appeals of this Lost Zone Charizard deck is it just has such a good Gardevoir
That
EX
last
matchup.
swoop in, and that's it.
One of the things I actually have been liking about this Lost Zone Charizard deck, and I've been kind of talking about it with my friend group, is that I think this Lost Zone Charizard EX deck actually kind of does what Giratina wants to do, but does it a little bit better.
I like that, yeah. You're getting way more damage. You're not sacrificing as much energy, and it's pretty straightforward.
The only thing you're kind of sacrificing is that V-Star power, which can just knock out anything, but what you're gaining is 50 additional HP on a big 2-prizer that has great typing already, an attack that only needs 2 energy, and you don't have to Lost Zone those energies, so you don't have to keep replenishing the energy to attack. And you get to play less Mirage Gates because the Charizard EX's ability already brings those energies into play, so you can play a little bit more consistency.
It is its own energy acceleration. I'd be interested to see if anyone throws in a 151 Charizard, which is a fire type, just because it does 330 damage.
Yeah, and who doesn't want to do 330 damage? Unless you face a Mew EX who just does 330 damage back to you.
Well, you get it right back, but yeah, it's a
sad.
risk I'm willing to take.
Yeah, exactly.
We will be back with Game 2 in a little bit. Thanks for sticking with us. Pokemon fans, welcome back to Tuesday Night Pokemon. Once again, I'm John. This is Tom. Tom, you wanted to say thanks to your wife for letting you do this every Tuesday?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Tom's wife. We appreciate that. Thanks for letting him join us. Tonight, we've got, for round 2, we've got Davin and Mike. Davin, who is playing Colorless Lugia, one of my favorite decks, one of yours as well,
Yeah.
Tom. And Mike playing Glamora EX.
Absolutely. Going to be a really interesting matchup here. Obviously, Lugia wants to have a lot of things on the bench. It has to have those 2 Archeops. It has to have a Lugia and multiple other attackers. It wants space for Luminion to find its supporter cards, and that Glamora EX is not
Would
going
like
to
a
allow
word
it.
with that
Yeah,
setup.
exactly.
Glamora
Now-
EX ability, limiting your opponent's bench to 3 Pokemon when it's in the
Yeah.
active.
Now, Davin is in a little bit of a predicament here, and he might not know how much of a predicament he's in. If Davin is going second this game, he might just lose. And the reason is he has a Professor's Research in hand, a Lugia V-Star in hand, and all of his other Lugia V-Stars are prized. If Davin discards this hand, he loses this
It
game.
is hand attachment
Yes.
to very few Pokemon.
Yes.
On the other side, Mike actually has 2 of his Soul Rocks in his prize card. Soul Rock used with, what's the other? Lunatone?
Lunatone, yeah.
Which allows you, when those are 2 on your bench with those particular flavors, to ignore Stadium's effects on your Pokemon.
Yeah.
So the goal here is for Mike to get the Soul Rock and the Lunatone on the bench with Glamora EX in the active with a Path of the Pekin. But if you can't get that,
Uh-oh, Davin is going second. And the thing is, he plays that Blissey V. He has all of the incentive in the world to discard this hand because he's got energy in it.
Yeah, how bad could
and
it be?
the Blissey V just gets those energies back, and he's got an Archeops. He's going to just say, great, I get to research away all this energy and an Archeops, get all the energy back with that Blissey V. But he just doesn't know what is about to hit him.
For Pokemon fans that are not quite up to speed on the menace that is Lugia, Lugia using Summoning Star to play the Archeopses from the discard pile back onto your bench. Archeops having the ability, Primal Turbo, you can place any special energy attached to your Pokemon in any way you like. 2 of them at a time to 1 Pokemon. Just massive energy acceleration. They all have to be special energy, though, from your deck. Thing is, if you can't get that Lugia to do Summoning Star to pull them out of the discard pile because you're out of Lugia V-Stars, this could be really interesting.
And there's definitely no Pokemon recovery in a Lugia list. So once they hit the discard, they are gone.
Potentially a Thornton play there, but Thornton only gets back a basic
Yep.
Pokemon. So.
Yep.
Davin right now incentivized to go get that Lugia on the bench as fast as possible. Always on your first turn, you want to get that Lugia down. Does he have a Squawk in hand as well?
I don't think so, but we are seeing that Squawk come down from Mike here, utilizing that Squawk Inseize ability, discarding his hand and drawing 6 cards if it is your first turn.
It's expensive, but sometimes it's what you need.
Yep, and Mike just was hoping to find more of those Glimmets to evolve up into Glamora on his next turn. Didn't have any way to do that in the current hand, and so he got rid of that hand,
Gonna go
and
find
now
one.
he finds that Ultra Ball off of that Squawk ability, lets him find that Glimmet.
Question coming up. Neither of these are Lost Zone decks. Mike's deck using probably the Barrel draw engine. I see the Barrel in the discard pile. Lugia is kind of just, it works really well, or you just get all gummed up. So.
Yeah. Now, Mike actually Ultra Balling away those 2 energy. Normally, you think, well, I want to attach one of those energy, but he has that Koraidon EX in the active, which has, I believe, the Dino Cry ability that says you may use this ability on your turn. You can attach 2 fighting energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon, and it ends your turn.
I don't think Davin could have had a worst hand. He's so much energy going into the discard pile. No way to get it back. He dumps that V-Star. The first chance he gets to look at his prize cards or figure out what's in his deck, he's going to be crushed.
Yeah.
Davin, from the commentary studio, I am so sorry.
And the problem is, too, here, Davin just drew into a bunch of energy off of that and a Great Ball for a Snorlax. He doesn't even get the Lugia V down this turn now.
Davin, Max from the last game we played said Davin is one of the best up-and-coming players here in the local scene, taking 128 in Pittsburgh. Davin did. So interested to see how he plays this. I played him with his Rapid Strike deck a couple of times. Very, very skilled player. We've seen him do pretty well at Cups, league tournaments. Interested to see how he manages this going into a deck I don't think I've ever seen played here. I wanted to play it once, but I brought Mill instead.
Now, the funny thing here is if Mike doesn't have a way to get this Koraidon EX out of the active on his next turn, Davin could take the first 2 prizes with this Blissey V and get that first Lugia V-Star out of the prize card. So Davin not out of it necessarily yet. But it all depends on what happens on Mike's turn this turn. If Mike KOs this Blissey V, which is weak to fighting.
He does have some energy acceleration, though, because Blissey V's ability allows you to take special energy from your deck or your hand.
From your discard
pile. So get rid of it, not the end of the world. A smart move by David. He's got Lugia V-Star budget Archeops going on with this Blissey V.
Yes. The problem here is that Blissey V is weak to fighting. And so if Mike is able to attack with this Glimmora EX on this turn, that Blissey is going down, and it's Davin's only attacker right now.
This is the craziest matchup I have ever seen on stream.
I'm glad you picked it. Unfortunately for Davin, those prize cards are just killing him right now.
Devastating. The 2 Ultra Balls, not the end of the world. Therapeutic energy, yeah, it keeps your Snorlax awake. But has he had a chance to look through his deck yet?
He has not. So he still has no idea.
Dun is playing the Dunsparce. I know something you've talked about. It allows you to do Paralyze, but it takes a ton of energy to get to that state.
Now, the one thing saving Davin here is that Mike does not have a way to switch this Koraidon EX out of the active position on this turn, which means Davin is going to get at least one more attack in with this Blissey V.
Indeed, the chat saying Dunsparce is the Dunsparce. Lunatone going down, maybe searching out his Soul Rock, realizing that it's not available. Hesitant to put down a Path to the Peak because it will disable his bench lock ability. Mike thinking for a second, wondering when he gets to, do some stuff. At this point, Nestball probably going to look for that Soul Rock. Hopefully he plays 3.
Now, the unfortunate thing for Davin here is currently this Blissey is only doing 140 damage on the next turn. It does 10 plus 30 more damage for each energy attached to it. So the math gets kind of weird with Blissey, but I think he does have that double turbo energy in hand, which I think will get him over that hump to KO this Koraidon EX on his next turn, which means David's going to take those first 2 prizes, get that Lugia V-Star out of the the prize cards. So David might pull it off here, and only because of this Blissey V, which is not a common card for these colorless Lugia decks to play.
Interesting choice from Mike choosing to not use the Ascension Glimmets. Glimmet, some of the cards from, I believe it was Pele Evolved, did have an Ascension ability where you could put it in the active, its attack allowed it to go evolve into a Glimmora. So choosing for the slightly more health, I believe, Rock Throw Glimmets.
The other terrifying thing for Davin in this game, which I didn't even think about until now, is Mike's deck is a path deck. I mean, he's just going to shut off that Lugia V-Star ability.
Has it in hand.
Even as soon as Davin gets it into play. So even if Davin is able to get that Lugia V-Star out of the prize cards and find a Lugia V and evolve it and get 2 Archeops in the discard pile, he's going to have to find a stadium bump as well.
This game is insane. Discarding some of the Pokemon on the bench might be beneficial to Davin, though. Luminion, just a massive liability in this deck.
And a great ball whiffing here for Davin. Still no way to find a Lugia V. Okay, Messagoza, if he gets a heads here, it's a tails.
Jeez Louise.
Davin could not have worse luck in this game if he tried. What is happening?
Both players attempting to play the game and struggling. That's just the card sometimes. Though. That's why Pokemon TCG is fantastic, because sometimes you just stare at your opponent and you laugh, and you hope this happens in social events and not at a regional.
Yes, and I just have to say, this is why we need to keep best of 3 at regionals. There's been a lot of talk on Twitter in the last week about moving to Japan's best of 1 format. And the funny thing about all those Twitter posts is all the Japanese players said, don't switch to it. It sucks. We like your format better. But all these American players think that the grass is greener on the other side, and we're all going to get stuck in best of 1s where we have to research away our only Lugia V-Star, and we're all going to lose, and we're all going to hate it.
Tom, are we touching a nerve here?
Yes, just a little bit.
All right, see the Glimmora EX come into the active. Davin forced down to just 3 Pokemon on his bench. Not a problem now. Will be a problem in a bit. He will not be able to put 2 Archeopses on his bench with the bench restriction of the Glimmora EX. Mike realizing now, though, that he needs to go find those Soul Rocks in his prize cards in order to make his Path to the Peak work. If I were Mike at this point, though, seeing the Summoning Star has not happened for this long, I'm just going to path and pray.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is, Davin's only draw supporter in that hand would be coming off that Luminion V.
And having to dump a Lugia.
I mean, he could find Iono.
Oh, it's true.
But, I mean... he
research it away again?
Yeah, just the fact after an Iono, a research, multiple search cards, he hasn't been able to find a Lugia V.
Tails on a Mesa again.
Heart of the Card certainly is not there for Daven, even if it was the right franchise.
Players getting their shuffling practice in. All right, so David on his side limited to 3 cards. Glamora EX's ability, Dust Field, I believe is what it's called. A fun card.
Yeah.
Not seeing a lot of meta play, but just a fun, interesting card you're not expecting.
The funny thing is that it's like that ability and that effect is so strong in the current format, and there's just nobody's found a spot for it. There's also a supporter card that does a similar thing called Avery, where you draw 3 and your opponent has to discard down to 3 benched Pokemon. Daven finally getting that Lugia V down onto the bench.
Turn
by
5
the way.
or 6 here at this point.
Flipping heads on that Mesagoza as well. So going to be able to find another Pokemon. But the problem is that if he benches it, he's not going to be able to get 2 Archeops out now.
Dunsparce going down onto Daven's bench. Dunsparce preventing his Pokemon from having weakness. So he's probably going to go get another Pokemon that is weak to fighting.
If Daven benches this Lumineon V, he gets 0 Archeops, even if he gets the Lugia V-Star in play.
And it's down.
Well, actually, sorry, I correct that. He has the boss's orders in hand to get around this Glamora EX's ability.
Looking to go grab an Iono, though.
Which means he will no longer have the boss's orders in hand. Oh man, this is
trying to see if he's got a V-Star.
Tough matchup for Daven.
Opting for the Iono. Iono going to give Mike and Daven 4 new cards each, their entire hand going to the bottom of the deck. If he chooses to use it. Want to jump ahead here?
Now, one of the nice things about this matchup, actually for Daven, is this Lugia V-Star does have resistance to fighting. And don't play this Iono. Please don't play this Iono. He's going to Iono his only Lugia V-Star to the bottom of the deck if he does it.
This is the best game of TCG I've ever watched.
And he just Ionoed himself into 2 energy, a Lugia V, and a Capturing Aroma. He has to flip heads on that Capturing Aroma on the next turn to get the Lugia V-Star, but he's going to use it now, and he flipped heads. Okay, so does he go and take the V-Star? He does. As long as Mike doesn't have a way to disrupt Daven's hand on the next turn.
At this point, though, he has no bench space. Dustfield is preventing any of them from going down. So best case, if he takes a prize this turn, if Mike takes a prize, he can get 1 Archeops in play. Something Star you can only use 1 time. Mike can go hunting for a Pokemon.
And I believe that was a Tails on the Mesagoza, so Mike not able to search for a Pokemon off of that. He does have 2 Glamora powered up here. And the funny thing about this colorless Lugia deck, they often do play that therapeutic energy, but there's one special condition, maybe 2 special conditions in the TCG that therapeutic energy doesn't cover, and it's poison and burn. And this Glamora EX's attack will be doing poison damage.
Radiant Sneasler on the bench, adding an extra 20 per Pokemon. Check them out as well. So if you don't get those guys out of the active, and Snorlax has huge retreat cost, they just take poison damage over and over again, and a little bit extra from that Radiant Hisuian Sneasler. What a great Pokemon name. Anyway, Snorlax does a pretty good attack, 160 damage, a lot of health too, 150, I think.
Yes.
But it falls asleep when it attacks, as Snorlax is known to do. But using a therapeutic energy, Radiant Sneasler is the name of my Rush cover band. I agree. Thanks, chat. Snorlax falling asleep, the therapeutic energy does keep it awake, though. One of the status effects it prevents is falling asleep.
Yes, and I believe that this Snorlax Unfazed Fat ability means that it is not affected by any effects of your opponent's attack. So I actually don't think that Glamora can poison the Snorlax.
Is that an unfazed fat one? Oh, it's not the other one.
I think we might need to pause. Let me pause and go check this game. I don't think that Snorlax is actually KO'd. All right, we are back. We just had to fix that minor gameplay error that Snorlax has the Unfazed Fat ability, which means it is not affected by the effects of your opponent's attacks, which means it cannot get poisoned by that Glimmora EX. And although that Snorlax is fighting weak, Davin has that Dunsparce on the bench to get rid of the weakness of any of his colorless
Indeed.
Pokemon in play, so that Snorlax is not KO'd. And it's just sitting there in the active with 140 damage on it. Davin wishes it was KO'd because then he'd be able to use that get that Archeops out with the Summoning Star.
At this point, Mike also seeing that get rewound, seeing that Lugia down. If he's got a Path of the Beak in hand, it's going out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good job, Professor Tom.
Thank you. I guess that's my job.
Flipping Tails, it looks like on the Mesagoza. Mesagoza is everyone's least favorite stadium when it doesn't work, and it's your favorite stadium when it does work.
Yes. What I always find is I play Lugia, I play Mesagoza down turn 1, hoping to find my Lugia V. I flip tails, I pass to my opponent, and they use it, and they flip heads.
They find that Genesect that they needed. Does it matter dice or coin? Asked the chat. Not technically. I do believe in tournament settings you do have to have a transparent dice to make sure that you don't have some lead shot on one side of it.
Correct. I also am like always a little bit like suspect of my opponents who use the coin.
A weighted coin.
No, it's just like I feel like it is easier to like cheat with a coin than if they like roll a transparent dice. You can be like, oh, you didn't really roll that, or you know,
Right. A coin can't be cocked though. As an avid D&D player, a coin can't be cocked. There's never any question. But at social setting, not the end of the world if you use a non-transparent dice. I mean, if you use a dice that only has 6 on all the sides as well, by all means.
I just always figure like if you're cheating at like a casual league night, like I
Good luck.
guess you really needed the win, you know.
If you ask Bert nicely here at the Forge, he might give you a little bit of a discount on packs as well if you're having a bad night. So. Speaking of which, Pokemon 151 should be getting some more stock in here at the Forge. So if you guys want to give them a call or an email, they got a lot in. It was all sold. They should be getting another batch this week. The store does a lot of volume, so if you want your 151 stuff, by all means swing down or shoot them an email. All right, Davin, great balling, finding another Lugia V. Can't do anything with it though. Going to Mesagoza. Mesagoza, everyone's worst enemy tonight. So that Lugia V-Star hanging out, waiting for room to work.
Sitting there, and Mike playing like a very interesting game here, choosing not to KO that Snorlax on his next turn because he knows that Davin doesn't have the bench space to get those Archeops out. The dangerous game that Mike is playing, though, is that Davin could find the boss's orders to boss around that Glimmora.
And there it is.
And there it is. That means that the Glimmora EX's ability is no longer in play, and Davin can open up those 2 additional bench spots for those Archeops to come out of his... We're going to have to pause again.
All right, Professor Tom back in action.
All right, just had to fix that as well. Davin used that Summoning Star to get 2 colorless Pokemon from his discard pile. However, they cannot have a rule box, so he tried to bring back that Blissey V, but you cannot bring back a V Pokemon because it has a rule box.
All right, I think this has been the most interesting TCG game. I think we're all a bit frazzled by how these decks are not working the way they're supposed to.
Yeah.
But I love it. This is the TCG.
But Davin, now he is in the lead after all of this, all the difficulties finding his Lugia V-Star, getting those Archeops into play, discarding energy, discarding his V-Stars. After all of this, Davin is in the lead.
Why did his Luminion go to the discard pile?
The Glimmora EX came back to the active and he had to discard his
Roger
bench
that.
down to 3. Yep.
All right, leaving that Snorlax snoozing in the active position. Mike going to start his turn. Does he have a Path to the Peak? It's not really useful at this point.
So I think one of the things there too is Mike is playing this deck with the Lunatone and Solrock. The Lunatone and Solrock have abilities, and the Lunatone's ability says prevent the effects of stadiums to your Pokemon with abilities as long as you have both a Lunatone and Solrock in play. The thing is, he prized 2 of his Solrocks,
He did indeed.
so
Both
he was
of them.
hesitant to put Path into play because it would shut off that Glimmora EX's ability. But if he had put that path into play, Daven still would be sitting here with no Archeops in play, because I don't believe he had the Stadium bump in hand.
All right, Mike opting to take a prize. Oh, excuse me. Did we have a scoop? Oh, we're shuffling right now.
So I think I know what Mike's doing here. So when Mike thought that he KO'd that Snorlax earlier, he did take one prize and saw it. So he's just trying to shuffle it. And because it's a league night, we're not going to penalize that or anything. It's just a casual league night. At a normal tournament, if you took a prize card when you shouldn't have, that would at least be a 2 prize penalty.
Alrighty. And if the game straight can't be restored, if a couple turns have gone by and then it was caught, then it's auto game loss?
Yeah.
All right. Still a friendly game. It's fun to see decks like this testing out here at the Forge on social nights, getting ready for both, serious regionals and cups and stuff like that, but occasionally just playing crazy decks that are not working as they're supposed to.
And Taven bringing out the Dunsparce here. So plays that Dunsparce to shut off weakness, but also has the Dunsparce, which has an attack for 4 colorless energy. Your opponent's active Pokemon is paralyzed, and then you shuffle the Dunsparce and all cards attached to it back into your deck.
For most decks, getting 4 energy on a Pokemon that has, 140 health would just be absolutely useless. But on social night, when you can paralyze guaranteed, it's kind of fun.
And you have to ask yourself, if I need to play Dunsparce and Lugia anyway because of Miraidon, do I just play the Dunsparce anyway?
I mean, it does take up a crucial spot for another Mazigoza to fail you.
Yes,
but
yes.
Plenty of energy getting thrown around here on Daven's side.
Now we do see Daven already pre-loading energy onto that Dunsparce, ready to use it on the next turn, because the funny thing here is between this Lugia's attack doing 200 damage and that Dunsparce doing 100 damage to this Glimmora, Daven can win the game with the Dunsparce. And I hope that's how we see it happen.
I do too. After an absolutely insane game, at the same time, he's able to promote Weirdeer if he would like, with no path to peak down. Weirdeer essentially takes all of the special energy with him.
Yep.
And then doing extra damage for each energy that is attached. Weirdeer does a lot of weird damage. Daven fist pumping a little excited, it looks like. Going through his cards quickly, just holding 3 things he doesn't need. Plenty of energy on the field for him to do what he needs to do, unless Mike is able to take KO on the Lugia. David just needed to take 2 prizes for the win. If that Glimmora stays in the active, that could be game. Squilbit with Nestash. Should he just stash it all and then just see what he can top deck just to make this even more interesting?
I think you always rely on the squirrel if you can.
Squilbit has the ability Nestash. You take your whole hand, you put them at the bottom of your deck, and you draw 1 card. We have seen in some massive tournaments them drawing the 1 card they need.
Yeah.
It does happen.
So we have a question here in the chat. Is there any way to take more than 2 prize cards on a turn? There is for Mike's deck, most likely not, but there is ways to do bench damage. There's ways to do damage with your abilities. So there are decks that can take all 6 prizes in 1 turn.
Tough to set up.
Because they can spread damage around early in the game and then finish it all off in 1 fell swoop. There's also decks that run Pokemon that give up 3 prize cards, so you could take 3 prize cards that way by just knocking out a Pokemon that gives up 3 prize cards.
The Nucleafairy in 151, also interesting that it does 50 damage and takes an additional prize card. So if you were to take out a VMAX with that, like a Claydol Clefairy.
There's also a Greedent VMAX, which does 30 damage, but if you knock out a basic Pokemon, you take 2 extra prize cards for it.
I love it. That was your solution to Lost Box.
That was my solution to Lost Box when I was playing Lugia in the team challenge. Our team went up against a team that had been playing all Lost Box decks for like the past 4 weeks, and we decided we're just going to play Lugia Greedent into them, and we won every game within 4 turns.
Perfect. Mike, I think seeing finally the value in Path of the Peak, disabling Weirdeer, setting up a Glimmora EX to suck down some more damage from that Lugia V-Star. He's going to do it. He's going to Nestash.
And
does have a barrel on the bench, so he could drop to 5 in his hand after that Nestash.
So that Squilvet pairing perfectly with that barrel. The Squilvet says shuffle your hand to the bottom of your deck and draw 1 card. The barrel says draw up until you have 5 cards in hand. So if you don't like any of the cards in your hand, you can Squilvet to get rid of them, and then barrel to draw up to more.
Nestash always coming in clutch, drawing a Professor's Research. So essentially that Nestash gives him 7 new cards.
Yep. And not a ton there. He does find that Soul Rock finally, but no bench spots for it. And so we're just going to see the attack into this Lugia. The therapeutic energy does not block poison. So this Glimmora's attack is going to do 140 plus 10 more damage for that poison. Hisuian Sneasler currently turned off because of that Path to the Peak.
Old Solrock on his bench now. Davin's turn. No boss's orders in hand. Got a Professor Burnett, which would have been very useful earlier in the game.
Now, I wonder, I'm not sure how much energy Davin has left in deck. I am not willing to do the math in my head currently, but he might be able to get there with the Weird Ear on this turn, but I'm not sure he's able to with just one Archeops in play.
One therapeutic, one V-Guard, two V-Guards, and one therapeutic is what it looks like.
So he could get to 6 energy on the Weird Ear, which would be 240, so not quite enough. And then that Weird Ear is weak to the fighting type Glamora, so you definitely don't want to get that into the active unless you're going to take the KO.
And all of that energy would leave with that Weird Ear. So if that Weird Ear heads up, takes everything with it to not do enough damage, that energy's gone. Not enough rocks in, backups in a deck to get all that energy back.
Yep. If Davin did have like a Jet energy in hand to get that Weird Ear into the active without discarding 2 energy from the Lugia to retreat it, he would have enough actually. But I believe he's out of, he does have one left in deck, but he's eyeing it up off this Archeops. I personally never tried to attach Jet energy with Archeops because it kind of ruins the purpose of it. But Davin here looking to probably paralyze this Glamora EX here.
Winning the game with the Dunsparce. The Dunsparce then all going back into the deck after it uses that attack, correct?
Yeah. So he's going to retreat out of this Lugia V-Star into that Dunsparce, going to use that attack, which I need to look up the name of that attack. I should just know it, shouldn't I?
I mean, we're really stretching our Pokemon knowledge here because these are a lot of cards we don't normally see.
The Dunsparce has the Dig Away Flash attack. Does 100 damage, and then you shuffle the Pokemon and all cards attached to it back to the deck. Your opponent's active Pokemon is paralyzed. Now Davin just wins the game on the next turn if Mike doesn't have a way to switch out of this Glamora, but he does have the escape rope in hand.
So paralyzed, your opponent cannot do anything including retreat, so you have to somehow remove it from the active spot, which an escape rope will do. Got a Glamora on the bench that's powered up, an escape rope in hand. Escape rope sending up your opponent's Pokemon of their choice first, and then you get to choose. I don't know what Davin would take at this point. Mike does need to take 3 prize cards, so there's still more time for Davin to cook.
So the problem is Mike needs to pair this escape rope with a boss's order. Well, actually, no. Escape rope just wins Mike the game here, potentially. Unless Davin has a double turbo energy in hand. Escape rope means that Davin has to either send up the Archeops or the Weird Ear, because he can't send up the Lugia or it will get...
Sending up the Weird Ear has enough health to survive this, but not another one.
Fighting weak.
Oh, it is fighting weak.
So all that Mike needs to do here is... Well, actually, Mike only has 3... Mike still has 3 prize cards remaining.
He does.
So even if he KOs this Weird Ear, Davin wins on the next turn with the Lugia. Also, that Lugia only has 120 damage on it because the Glamora does 30 less because of resistance. So that's something we'll keep in mind. If it comes into play, we'll run in there and stop him. Actually, I might go tell them that now.
Professor Tom, pause number 3 coming up for this absolutely crazy game between Mike and Davin.
We just had to go in there and inform Davin that he had 30 less damage on that Lugia V-Star because Lugia resists fighting.
When was the last time you've had to pay attention to resistance?
It doesn't come up very often. The only reason I actually know that is because I played against a Glamora on ladder earlier this week with Lugia.
All right, Mike fighting around a little bit, trying to decide what to do, giving up 1 prize card, knowing that it might be a losing battle at this point. If he plays a Cheryl, Cheryl allows you to heal all the damage off your evolution Pokemon, but you have to get rid of all the energy.
Yeah, the thing Mike really needs to find is, well, a way to... I don't know. Mike needs a lot. He needs to get that Path to the Peak out of play so that the poison does more damage. But even then he'd be 10 short. I was going to say he could KO the Archeops, and then David might not have the energy to finish the game. But the Archeops also resists fighting, and even if he was doing the 20 extra with the Hisuian Caesar, he'd only do 140 to the Archeops, which is one
damage
short.
counter short. Archeops, not to be discounted as a good attacker, but
Yeah.
it is so valuable in Lugia. It's one of the last things you want to have
Yeah.
to send up, but sometimes it is what you need.
Absolutely.
What does Boost Shake do?
Boost Shake says that you can just search your deck for a Pokemon that evolves from one of your Pokemon in play and evolve it, and then your turn ends.
Roger that. So it's Ascension, but for any Pokemon.
Correct.
All right, Mike opting to get a Professor's Research.
Was that off of Nestash
I
again?
don't know.
It feels like it was.
Squilvid, the real VIP on this game. That is also a play Pokemon Squilvid, so he won
Yeah.
that card. Good for
Yeah.
him.
Now, decided not to play that research because I think Mike is digging for that boss's orders. But
Right.
does not quite get there. He has the Judge, though. Could disrupt Davin's hand.
David only holding 2 cards. Attach. 10 seconds left in the round to be going to turns. Turns when it starts. Turn 0 is the person currently in play, and then you go back and forth till turn 3 has happened. And then whoever has the most prize cards in at turn 3. I don't think we're going to get to turn 3, though. Opting for research.
All right, so that is time, which means that Mike's turn is turn 0. Each of these players will get 2 additional turns. So Mike is turn 0, Davin turn 1, Mike turn 2, Davin turn 3. So each player gets to have a chance to finish out this game before it comes to a tie.
Did see the World Championships determined by a very, very, very clutch attack right before time was called.
Yeah, yeah.
So sometimes these turns are that what decides the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And time management, a very important thing. The funny thing about Worlds this year is Tord might have won if he didn't pile shuffle.
Pile shuffle when you kind of take the cards and mash them together in your hand. Riffle shuffle being a great way to destroy your cards. My personal favorite way of destroying my cards. But yeah, it was the last couple of seconds that it was attack and passed over to Tord, and then Tord was at a disadvantage on turns, and Vance took the World Championship.
Yeah.
Which is tough. Tord the Lord, arguably the best player ever, still yet to win a World Championship.
Yeah.
2 V guards, they don't stack.
Could retreat out of this Weirdeer, but no reason to. Probably will just... Oh, he does have the attachment for turn, so this Weirdeer is attacking, taking this prize on that Lunatone. And Davin putting himself in a very good position to win this game on his next turn. Only needs to take 1 prize card. And really the only thing Mike can hope to do here is maybe boss stall that Snorlax and hope that Davin doesn't have a way to retreat it out of the active spot and turn it into from a loss to a tie for Mike.
So it would be get Snorlax up, stall, get a boss, and then take 2 prizes for the tie.
And Mike has the boss orders in hand, so he can boss up that Snorlax. And I think this game ends in a tie if he chooses to do so.
How did this game end in a tie?
I don't even know. This is wild.
Still not done yet. Davin, a very skilled player. Mike obviously bringing a deck no one was expecting. Interested to see what happens here.
Play that boss. Make it a tie. I think both players deserve a tie here.
This is a game that both players deserve a tie. Professor Tom having to step in a couple of times. Me just enjoying these nonsense decks. Colorless Lugia, very competitive, but this particular flavor of Davin's very spicy.
That Blissey V, getting him that V-Star that he needed out of the prize cards, though.
That much energy coming in.
Ultra Ball away.
Don't get rid of the boss stars. Oh, thank God.
Okay. So we still have a shot here for that boss orders to stall this game into a tie. Mike looking at his deck. Not much of that deck left.
Opting to grab a Lunatone, thin that deck out a little bit. It's looking pretty skinny. All right, Weirdeer having the ability to attack.
And we see the boss's orders bringing up that Snorlax.
Gonna stall.
Now, one thing that... Oh, he doesn't, because the Path of the Peak is in play. I was going to say, he has that Koraidon in hand, so if we weren't in turns and he didn't have Path of the Peak in play, he could potentially power up that Koraidon as an attacker that can do a little bit more damage. And that might have been a good way to swing into the Archeops and KO it, or KO the Lugia from where it is currently.
Well, Mike is down on prize cards right now, so unless he takes 2 prize cards, correct me if I'm mistaken, he does lose.
Yeah, I mean, if Davin can take a KO on his next turn, then Mike loses. So as long as Mike doesn't attack into the Snorlax here, it's just a tie.
Oh, I was under the impression that the most prized cards loses during turns. I'm learning something again.
No,
from
it's
you,
just a
Professor
tie.
Dull.
You have to take all your prize cards. And Mike passes to Davin. Davin does not have a Jet Energy in hand, which is his only way to get out of this Snorlax in the active spot. And
Mike going to confirm that, it looks like. Looking to see 4 Jet Energies slide by.
Davin
1,
has
2, 3.
2 energy left in deck. That Snorlax has a 4 retreat cost. So no way to get that Snorlax out of the active spot. He does grab the Jet Energy off that Archeops. I wonder if he has a supporter in hand. He must not. But if he did have a supporter in hand. So
A great ball.
yeah, the Great Ball could go find Lumineon, but Path to the Peak is in play.
Going to attach the energy. Not quite enough to do the attack. No energy in hand.
So this is just going to end in
And
a
it's
tie.
How did this game end in a tie? I love it.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. Well played by both players. Very cool to see these spicy decks tonight at our locals. Yeah,
That was
a lot of fun.
That was fantastic.
We got to see a Dunsparce attack.
A Dunsparce attack against a Glamora EX deck. Colorless Lugia
Yeah.
playing some awesome stuff.
Who would have ever thought?
And now David checking out the camera. We'll be back with an interview of the winner, I believe, in a couple minutes.
No winner, so probably no
Oh, no.
winners interview
Oh,
here,
that's a good point.
actually.
Should we interview them both?
Maybe we'll interview
We'll
them
interview
both.
both.
We'll see if we have time between rounds. We have hit time already, so we might just have to jump into round 3. But stay tuned.
Cheers. Welcome back, Pokemon fans. We've got a juniors match tonight. You got Jack, who I'm particularly fond of. He's my son, and today is his birthday. Against
Is
Marco.
it his birthday?
It is actually his birthday.
Is that
today.
why there's cupcakes?
That is
out
why
there?
there's cupcakes.
I
We
had
brought
no
cupcakes
idea.
for everybody. Jack playing Kyurem. Marco, an extremely skilled junior player, playing Gengar VMAX. This is an interesting
Yeah.
matchup.
Two VMAX Pokemon that have seen their fair share of success, but that was like a year and a half ago.
In the juniors, these decks are still extremely viable because they hit fast.
Yep.
They're straightforward.
Yep.
And you're not expecting them.
Yeah. So very cool to see these decks doing well, and will be awesome to watch Jack and Marco pilot them. Now, one of the concerning things for Jack is that Marco's deck plays past the peak, which Kyurem doesn't like to see.
Not at all.
And one of the concerning things for Marco is he prized two of those Houndours.
That is not what you want to see when you're playing Gengar VMAX. Did also prize a Path to the Peak. One of the Achilles heels of Jack's deck, though, is he doesn't play that many basic Pokemon, so sometimes he can just hand his opponent a lot of extra cards at the start of the game.
I think we saw 3 mulligans there from Jack to start the game, which means Marco's 5 mulligans, actually. So Marco's going to get to draw 5 additional cards at the start of the game. And Jack put out those prize cards, and it's energy.
So Jack's deck, the Kyurem deck, famous for playing 30 energy, using its ability Glaciated World to essentially just roll the dice every turn and just attach energy as you need. Marco
Absolutely.
taking those mulligan cards, though. Should be interesting. If Kyurem fires off fast, it's almost impossible to stop.
Yeah.
But if he turn 3 or 4, gets those VMAXs, it can be tricky.
Yeah. So Marco starting out this game with that Battle VIP pass, going to be searching his deck, and what he's probably really looking for here are those Houndours. The question is, does he play 4 of them or only 3? Because if he plays only 3, he's only getting 1 here. And it looks like it's potentially only a 3/3 line of those Houndours, which is going to be very rough for Marco given that he has prized 2 of them.
The ability he's looking for, I'm assuming, is Houndoom having the ability to attach single strike Pokemon, single strike energy from his deck.
Yep. And so that Houndoom's ability, don't remember what it's called, but it will accelerate those single strike energy from the deck to your Pokemon, and I believe it puts 20 damage counters on any Pokemon that it accelerates energy to.
All right. So Marco's still working on his first turn, unable to play a supporter in this TCG format. You cannot play a supporter or attack on your first turn. Ideally, though, Jack's deck does want to go second.
Yeah.
Jack drawing for turn. Oh, he found the card that he likes to see the most. Adventurer's Discovery. Gonna go find those Kyurem Vs and maybe a couple Kyurem VMAXs.
Maybe a couple VMAXs.
And the point here is also thinning your deck.
Yep.
The more non-water or the more water Pokemon you get out, the more items you get out, what have you, the more likely you are to draw water energy on those Glaciated Worlds.
And we see 2 Kyurem Vs and a VMAX coming down from Jack here off of that Adventures Discovery. He's also got water energy in hand, and I believe that Kyurem V's first attack just puts more water energy into play, right?
You can attach them however you would like to your Pokemon. So a lot of times you'll see him spread out that water energy kind of however he would like.
Is it any amount of energy from your hand?
Yes.
Wow.
And there's
he's
a
got,
lot of
I believe,
energy.
3 energy in that hand.
3 energy in hand, holding onto a Kyurem VMAX so he can upgrade that Kyurem V to a Kyurem VMAX next turn. The attack from the Kyurem VMAX doing 50 damage for each discarded water energy on top of 120.
Yeah. Now, the only sad thing here for Jack is I think we're going to see this Kyurem V get knocked out here by this Gengar VMAX. That Gengar VMAX has 2 attacks. The first, I believe, does 60 damage for each V your opponent has in play. But the second attack, I believe, just does a straight 250 damage. And with that Houndoom in play, Marco is going to be able to get the requisite 3 energy onto that Gengar VMAX.
Upgrading it, finding what he needed early on in the game. 2 decks that play really fast. Playing politely, too. I like to see that. A rogue deck. I hope Marco finds his way down to Peoria with this Gengar VMAX deck. The enemy of Gardevoir as well. Gengar VMAX is dark type. Gardevoir does not like that.
And Mew.
And Mew. Good point.
We see that Houndoom's ability accelerating that single strike energy from the deck and going to be putting it on one of Marco's single strike Pokemon.
Maybe a minor misplay on Jack, putting all that energy on the Kyurem V. Maybe spreading it around a little bit.
Yeah, I think you just kind of hope that, you know, your opponent can't swing for more than 220 damage on their second turn of the game.
Gengar VMAX.
But Gengar VMAX getting there.
All right, on the next turn here. Seeing for Jack, Radiant Greninja has been prized. It's the only way he can draw cards. You got plenty of energy to discard. It's never coming back. You don't really need it. But that being prized is kind of a big deal. Everything else pretty standard. Marco taking their first 2 prizes. Now Jack going into a Kyurem V. Going to draw for turn. Going to attach energy. Upgrading to the Kyurem V Max.
Is that another Adventures? An Irida in Jack's hand. So going to be able to find a water Pokemon and an item card. So he can find that second Kyurem V Max. And what kind of item cards is Jack normally looking for in this deck?
He plays 1 item card, and that is an escape rope. A couple stadiums just in case Path to the Peak does go out. But if he finds another Kyurem V Max, a Pal Pad in the deck as well. Pokegear 3.0,
Yeah.
excuse me. If he finds another Kyurem V Max, which looks like he grabbed, and he gets lucky on 2 Glaciated Worlds, you could see him swinging for 270 points of damage.
Yeah. And depending on what attack Marco declared on his last turn, he may not be able to attack again on this turn. If Marco used that first attack to KO the Kyurem V, which he was able to do because of the single strike energies in play, he can attack again. But the second attack on the Gengar V Max that does 250 damage.
I think
says
we
that
just
you
saw
cannot
2
use it the next
attachments from
turn.
hand.
I think he used. He didn't have any cards in hand, I don't believe.
He Glaciated World. I could be mistaken. But
Yeah, I
think
believe it was a Glaciated World because he did not have any energy in hand.
All right, very good.
He put all the energy that he had in hand, he put on the Kyurem V last turn.
So
Except for 1.
So he attached 1 per turn, and then he missed the Glaciated World, so I'm wondering where the third energy came from.
The second Glaciated World, I believe.
He missed it.
To both of them?
Yep. I hit the first one and missed the second one.
Okay, let's go just check on that maybe
Do a
quick.
quick pause.
Yep.
And we're back. A mistake on the caster's point here. I thought I was a missed Glaciated World.
So passing back over to Marco's turn, I believe Marco has how much damage on that Gengar now? That's a lot of different numbers.
14, 17. So if he discarded 1, he would have done 170 damage. So
Okay.
we should be at 190 right now.
So Jack going to be able to 2-shot this Gengar. And meanwhile, I don't think this Gengar has any way to 1-shot Kyurem unless he's able to get 4 single strike energy on it. The problem is between that Houndoom and that 4 Seal Stone being able to search the deck for that 4th one as an attachment for turn, he may be able to get the 1-shot on this Kyurem VMAX.
Kyurem VMAX having 330 health. Hard to one-shot it, but that single strike energy adding 20 damage per single strike energy attached.
And that second attack on the Gengar VMAX does 250 plus 80 from 4 single strike energies, gets him to that perfect 330 number. And this kind of really shows you the big difference between going first and going second sometimes in the TCG. I think Jack definitely favored going first. Marco favored going, and Marco in this game obviously favored because he went first. Whichever deck kind of goes first in this matchup, they're both swinging for big one-hit KOs, and Marco was just able to do that first.
Jack holding an Adventurous Discovery in hand, one-hit KO. Unfortunately, 3 prizes taken as those go down. If the Kyurem VMAX deck does not get fired off fast enough, he's not going to be able to power this up. Going to get some Adventurous Discovery, going down fighting. It's fun watching him scroll through his deck because it's just
It's just energy.
water energy.
Able to find another Kyurem here, though. Probably another VMAX in there as well. And going to be able to Glaciated World to maybe get 1 energy on this Kyurem, but we know that Marco already has the energy needed on that active Gengar to take the one-hit KO. The problem is he can't do it this turn because it says that this Gengar cannot attack again on its next turn after it uses that second attack. But I think I did see a switching card in Marco's hand. He's gotten energy to retreat out of the Bidoof or the Houndour.
I got another Gengar on the bench, and even a Houndoom if he could power it up in time.
Let's see it. Glaciated World, and an Attach for Turn from Jack.
And then a pass. Glaciated World, a powerful energy accelerator, but that Kyurem VMAX does take 3 water energy to its attack. I think a smart move by Jack, not getting rid of all of it, because he wasn't able to reach out and quite take him out.
Force Seal Stone come down onto that Houndour, or onto that Houndoom. Switching it over to the Gengar VMAX. I don't think it matters.
It is against force technically, but
You can attach it to a Houndour or the Houndoom. It just can't be used on the Houndoom, and he already has one on the other Gengar VMAX, so it doesn't really matter either way. But using that V-Star power to search his deck for any one card, finds that switch card, has another switch card already in hand, so he's going to be able to switch out of the active,
and then switch back into the active,
hit for another 330 damage, and Marco able to take this game over Jack. And that was the funny thing, when VMAXs ruled the world, games did not last very long.
Did not last very long. Showing the power of Gengar VMAX getting out fast. Jack, a great player, really consistent, but when you don't get those Kyurems out fast enough against another fast deck, that's kind of it.
And this is kind of one of the reasons people loved to see V-Stars and EXs come into the game. More 2-prizers rather than 3-prizers, because in the world where VMAXs reign supreme, there was just really no way to come back when you got behind. Your opponent really only needed to take 2 KOs to win the game, and there was just no way to come back from that. The games didn't last long enough. There weren't enough turns in the game to recover from a slow start, and it's one of the reasons a lot of people are happy to see Stage 1, Stage 2 EXs start to be the meta in the current format.
As a fan of decks that rely solely on coin flips, though, Kyurem VMAX is one of my favorite to play, especially in locals, because it's just fun when you beat the guy who's playing Gardevoir so badly it hurts.
And the Glaciated World ability is very strong. Looks at the top card of your deck. If it's a water energy, you can attach it to one of your Pokemon. If it's not, you just discard it. And when your deck is mostly water energy and you maybe get 4 Kyurem VMAXs into play, you're attaching up to 5 energy a turn.
How does 7 times 50 sound?
Pretty good. Pretty good. So
good game between the juniors, between Jack and Marco. Probably be back with a winner's interview in a little bit.
I think we're probably just going to skip the winner's interview tonight. Running out of time. But well played by both players. Got to see our juniors finals tonight. We'll be back here next week on Tuesday for our League Challenge. So definitely more rounds to stream next week. Stay tuned and come on down to the Forge for the League Challenge if you live here locally.
See you in a week. Cheers.